While I was studying for my project, the phone rang unexpectedly. When I pulled it out of my pocket, I noticed an unusual number and was concerned that it was a telemarketer. I responded cautiously. This is a lot worse, I thought. May I speak with Mark Mallon? The formal voice inquired. I confirmed that it was me. Please hold for Miss Peterson, the voice instructed. I ended the call a minute later. The telephone rang again. Mr. Mallon, I apologize. We got cut off. Please hold for Miss Peterson. I ended the call again. The phone rang again, and as usual, I answered it. An agitated voice came over the phone, outlining the problem. I interrupted. Please tell Miss Peterson. I'm not interested in talking to her today or any other day. I hung up and resumed my work. In less than 5 minutes, the telephone rang again. I recognized the familiar number and opted to leave it on voicemail. A message icon flashed, but I decided not to check it. I had already decided on my mission and started arranging the goods correctly. The phone rang again, shattering the quiet environment. I chose to turn off the obnoxious device. I remembered my first instruction on power tools. Concentrate on the task at hand. This not only ensured safety, but also accelerated the passage of time. Now I concentrated on putting the 10-foot pine planks vertically, parallel, with 6-inch spacing between the studs. Next, I used my measuring tape to add the horizontal 2x4s. 1 on top, and 2 on the bottom. I confirmed that the building was square. Then, using a power hammer, I drove nails into each stud, fastening them to the frame. I paused to assess my work, which I considered satisfactory. I elevated the frame and leaned it up against the unfinished basement wall. I discovered a pre-drilled hole in the horizontal bottom board and used the second air hammer to drive the long concrete nails along the bottom. A quick check with a level proved that it was straight. I returned to the first air hammer to secure the top brace. Another check to ensure it remained square, and I stepped back to admire the results in the basement. A few things appeared small, but I swiftly constructed the frame in 15 minutes, producing 4 frames every hour. I anticipated to complete the entire framing project tonight. Moving closer to completion, I was relieved that the prior chores of installing conduit lines, electrical cabling, and HVAC ducting had gone successfully. Furthermore, the plumbing was already in place, which alleviated my concerns. This weekend, I would finish the framing. On Saturday, I would install insulation and paneling, and on Sunday, I would lay the wood parquet flooring. This would be a well-deserved reward for my efforts, and I would enjoy a 6-pack of beer from my cold cooler. In only a few weeks, the entire basement renovation would be completed today. I limit my drinking to a single 6-pack of beer per weekend with 2 beers per day. After completing my daily responsibilities, it feels like only yesterday when a 6-pack would be a prelude to a night of heavy drinking. This change, however, is due to Miss Peterson. Mr. Nis Peterson is my ex-wife. I shook my head at my resentment toward Dennis. How could a lady to whom I was so completely attached be so unkind? I worked on the frame. The longer I worked, the less time I had to think. The sooner I finished, the sooner I could relax in a warm shower and enjoy a few of drinks before retiring to bed. And if I were lucky, there would be no dreams. That was the essence of my current daily routine. Keep myself engaged so that there is no room for pain. It was a difficult way to live, but it was preferable to confronting death every day. I'm used to that last thinking. I began organizing the boards for the following photo. I walked upstairs to get a drink of water. And a nice shower before bed. When I awoke, I remembered to turn on my phone again. There were 20 additional calls and voicemails from the same person that called yesterday. I deleted all of the messages without listening to the ostensibly crucial demands from Denise's assistant. Dressed, and free of weekend distractions, I approached my computer to handle urgent business affairs. Emails were sent out to address the concerns at hand. After a short breakfast of Wheaties, I descended to the basement, put on a mask, and began the chore of adding insulation rolls to the frames. Classic rock songs on the radio filled the hours, punctuated by occasional labor-related grunts and minor cursing. By mid-afternoon, I had completed installing the equipment and went upstairs to make a sandwich while enjoying my turkey sandwich. I looked outside at the dreary rainy November day. It reminded me of a rainy November day from last year. I remember being drenched outside my in-laws' house after arriving in Chicago on Thanksgiving morning. This was an unexpected surprise visit. Neither my wife, children, nor my in-laws had invited me. When the door opened, I noticed my brother-in-law's surprised countenance before he could make an excuse. I managed to go by him and into the bustling atmosphere of the place. My appearance disrupted the bustling gathering. My 14-year-old son, Brian, glanced down, and my 17-year-old daughter, Susan, hastily from the room. My wife, Denise, separated herself from the stranger she was seated with. Despite being ashamed, she presented me to Paul Starling. The man stood and extended his hand. But I remained transfixed, staring at him until he dropped his hand. My mother-in-law, meanwhile, visited the room to verify that no dramatic events transpired. As I stood there, rainfall from my trench coat proceeded to soak her carpet. "Mark, we were not expecting you to arrive. When did you come here?" I heard someone say. I ignored her comment as I attempted to get my wife's attention, but she appeared busy with something on her mother's wall and did not turn to face me. I walked back to the front door and stepped outside, taking out my phone to summon a taxi. Maybe I could catch the cab that had driven me here before it got too far away. Nobody from inside the house came out to encourage me to stay. I exhaled as the memory slipped away. I returned to the basement to begin installing the sheets of paneling. The task proceeded swiftly because the sheets, while hefty, covered a huge area. I used my claw hammer to attach the paneling nails to the studs. Fortunately, for me, the paneling with cutouts for electrical outlets and heating air vents worked well. However, I could utilize the heater unit. I found that I rapidly warmed up, thus there was little need for heat. I was delighted with my cautious preparation because I just had a few boards and a few of sheets of extra paneling left. I brought them to the garage and kept them there until I could carry them to the workshop. I installed electrical outlets and wired them sequentially using typical color labeling. I ensured that the ground wire was not connected to the hot wire. I wired the system to a circuit breaker in the breaker box to ensure electricity to the outlets and proper circulation for the HVAC system. It wasn't a major deal, but I screwed in the outlet and duct covers. I used a shop vac to clean the floor before applying the adhesive the next morning. After that, I was looking forward to taking a shower. The warm water relieved my tired muscles and I appreciated the steamy water. This was in stark contrast to the frigid temperatures I encountered at O'Hare Airport during Thanksgiving. I was both physically and mentally relaxed while I sought for a ticket home, regardless of price. I realized my marriage had ended. I just didn't know when the funeral would be. After drying off, I decided to go to bed. Tomorrow would be another long and hopefully productive day. As soon as I lay down, I fell asleep. On Sunday morning, I awoke to the sound of an impending rainstorm. I dressed on my trousers, work boots, and a t-shirt. Before going downstairs, I hoped we wouldn't lose power during the daytime. I turned on the radio to a sports channel to catch the game. I generously applied the adhesive on the basement floor, providing an even coverage throughout the entire surface. I considered making a custom wood parquet floor for the basement, but it proved to be too expensive. So I kept boxes of pre-made parquet tiles beside the stairs. After the adhesive had set for the appropriate amount of time, I started laying the tiles. I went upstairs and mentally planned my next big project: sanding, staining, and varnishing the flooring. I compiled a list of necessary instruments to rent, including a floor sander and a floor buffer. The other tools, including small sanders, pry bars, hammers, brushes, and rollers, were already in the workshop. I took great care with the vintage baseboards and moldings to keep them in good condition. I catalogued each item and assigned it to the relevant room in the kitchen. I brewed coffee and reflected on the progress I'd made in the previous month. The bright fluorescent lights illuminated the room, emphasizing the sophisticated appliances. I ate my breakfast in the nook beside the food preparation island, admiring the colorful Mexican glazed tiles that adorned it. All I had to do was knock out a non-load-bearing wall in a room that had previously been a small, servant dining area, resulting in a greatly expanded kitchen. I extended the shelves in pantry, but the room remained too large. I installed a brick pizza oven, which completed the kitchen design. The notion of pizza brought back memories of meeting Denise during a freshman mixer at a nearby pizza parlor during university. She appeared athletic, with long, strong legs, a slim frame, and a welcoming grin. She was disturbed by an intoxicated man. I couldn't understand what he said, but his actions deserved a slap across the face before he could respond. I intervened and positioned myself between them to deter additional aggression. He continued to be nasty, attempting to reach her, but I held my position. The bouncers eventually intervened, accompanying the man out of the area. As I turned around, I was staring into a set of mesmerizing green eyes. Denise introduced herself and Mark introduced himself. We chatted for a while before she excused herself, and I expected our encounter to be brief. A month later, I was walking across campus and heard someone call my name. A woman wearing a Raggedy Ann outfit with Greek letters on her bib approached me. "Do you have any condoms?" she asked. Surprised, I paused. She explained that she was pledging a sorority and needed to get a condom from a student on campus for her final assignment before getting admitted. I nodded and handed her the condom from my wallet, which I had kept since 9th grade. She thanked me before hurrying off to her sorority house. Another month passed as the college prepared for homecoming. I was walking back to my dorm when someone began walking alongside me. I tried to recognize the person. "Hi, are you prepared to aid me for the third time?" "I beg your pardon." They stopped forcing me to stop as well. "Are you prepared to aid me for the third time? You assisted me in the pizza parlor and when I needed to pledge my sorority. I need you to help me again." Puzzled, I inquired, "How am I supposed to help you?" They explained, "I'm supposed to attend homecoming with a guy from our brother fraternity, but the guy is a total jerk. The only way I can avoid going is to schedule a date with someone else." I cynically responded, "That's great for my confidence. How could I not accept such a generous invitation?" She did not seem to understand my irony. She told me about her sorority house, location, and dating aspirations. I was puzzled by the incident. Later, I informed my roommate about it. He encouraged me to go on the date, saying I might have a good time. He gave me a condom and joked that I might have a lucky night. I didn't have much luck on my date. Instead of watching football, Denise and I spent our time getting to know one another. After the game, we went to a little coffee shop to continue talking. We were so caught up in conversation that we didn't notice the place was closing. We walked to our house and I paused before attempting to kiss her. Denise took the lead and said, "Good night." Not even a kiss on the cheek. I interpreted it as a message that I did not quite measure up. When I returned home, my roommate had left and I had grown. We're used to him not returning until Sunday evening. I laid in bed, thinking about her beautiful eyes. Throughout the next month, I attempted to contact Denise but was told she was unreachable. I then learned that she had begun dating someone else. I was disappointed that I had missed my chance before it even started. A sharp crack of thunder interrupted my thoughts about Denise. I returned to the basement and began laying the tongue and groove tiles down the sidewalls. I only paid half attention to the game, occasionally pausing to collect more tiles from the box. By the time I completed laying the floor, I was happy with how the tiles looked against the wood. I nailed down the miter baseboards and the project was finished. All I had to do was install the track lighting and crown molding and the basement would be finished. But that was for another day. Today, I would celebrate. The work week would begin in the morning and I would focus on earning money. During those hours, perhaps in the evenings, I would accomplish some little household duties that were not worth wasting a weekend on. On Friday, the cycle would repeat as I continued to work on the house. That Friday, I drove to Home Depot and rented a floor sander and buffer for my work pickup vehicle. I also purchased enough coarse, medium and fine-grade sandpaper pads to finish both floors of my house this week. I spent the evenings painstakingly raising the molding and baseboards in each room. I catalogued each piece and had already sanded it down. All that remained was to sand the sections with the sander. The baseboard and molding would cover the space near the walls so there was no need to stand up to them. My phone rang and I noticed another call from Denise's workplace. Over the last week, I had gotten infrequent calls from her office. So I eventually added the number to my speed dial so I could instantly identify it. This reminded me of a Friday phone call from long ago. I was studying when the dormitory phone rang. I figured it was for my roommate, but he had already gone. I responded and prepared to take a message for him. "Where are you now?" the voice shouted. "Who is this?" I inquired, surprised. "This is Denise." The voice responded. "Now where are you?" I replied. "I answered your call, so I am here." "Come to my sorority home right now," Denise demanded. I hesitated, but ultimately decided to go. At the sorority home, I introduced myself and waited. Denise was arguing with a man in the corridor when I saw her. Their conversation became heated and she pointed at me, eliciting a glare from the man. She dashed outdoors, exclaiming, "We need to leave," and began to guide me away. After a while, I asked, "Could you explain what's happening?" She frowned at me, claiming that the fraternity member was pestering me again. "How is this my responsibility?" I inquired. "I needed help." She yelled, "Why haven't you contacted your boyfriend?" I turned and left. I ultimately went back to the coffee house where we had our homecoming date. She joined me and sat beside me. As we talked, my rage subsided. Then she suggested, wanting to see me. But there is one little condition: I am pulled to you, but I am not ready for a committed relationship. I want to date you while also seeing others. If this is our fate, we will know it. Will you accept that? I paused. I'm not delighted about having to share her. She then kissed me and I realized I was lost. Some weekends I'd go on a date with her, but others I'd spend alone, plagued by thoughts of her with others. After 4 months, we had intercourse in her automobile. And my feelings grew stronger. I attempted to persuade her, but she continued to date others. This perplexing cycle continued for 2 years until one day she said, "I'm pregnant." The entire world came to a standstill. She glanced at me and said, "This is ours." I knew exactly what she anticipated. I was panicking within. I had 1 year remaining to complete my business degree. Then I would go for an MBA and a decent job. That was when I proposed to Denise. But not now. Denise intended to pursue a history degree before continuing on to law school for 3 years. Suddenly, our plans had to change. We spoke and found a solution. We would have a simple wedding. I would work and support her through law school. When she acquired a job, she promised to help me pursue my MBA. Then we may live happily ever after. That's when the issue became more serious. I met her mother, who was known for her strict demeanor. She conveyed her concerns about my relationship with her daughter and maintained them throughout our time together. My grandmother, who had reared me, had similar doubts about the marriage. However, she merely fixated on safeguarding her home, which I would eventually acquire via a prenuptial agreement. Denise, my partner, was not pleased with this condition. But my grandmother's wishes triumphed and she agreed to it. We had a quiet, intimate wedding ceremony and began our lives together. Denise's pregnancy and my juggling of several odd jobs to support us made our last year of school difficult. I mowed lawns, performed modest home repairs, and took on contract work when available. We graduated and Denise gave birth to our daughter, Susan. Denise was accepted to law school and her mother posted several graduation and baby images. I was not in any of them. I got a stock brokerage internship and took on the less attractive tasks. I worked hard, making cold calls and delivering lunches. I eventually obtained my broker's license and began trading stocks with the supervision of a senior broker. My compensation increased in tandem with my skill level. However, my wife, Denise, and I struggled to save money because she found ways to spend every penny I earned. When Denise started her 3rd year of law school and became pregnant again, our family expanded with the arrival of our son, Brian. Now I had to care for a baby, a 3-year-old child, and a wife who was studying for law school finals and the bar exam. There were several occasions when I held my cool when Denise or her mother complained about anything. I realized how important it was to assist Denise attain her dream. So I endured their criticisms and continued to encourage her as she spent time with her study group. I occasionally joined them when they went to a bar to unwind. I would leave early to care for the babies and give Denise some personal time. My goals did not match the approval of some of my extremely competitive male study mates who teased me in front of Denise. I was ready to face them physically, but I knew it would have a negative effect on Denise. So I swallowed my pride and pretended I didn't hear or understand their jokes. The day of finals was over and my daughter Denise finished 3rd in her class. I was proud when she walked across the stage at graduation while I cradled our children. She was radiant as she met numerous classmates before leaving for a graduation Party. She returned home around 10 a.m. the next day, stating that she had spent the night at a friend's house after drinking too much alcohol. I argued that she should have phoned me for a ride, which sparked a violent dispute and made our children cry. I spent the next several hours reassuring them. Finally, I chose not to concentrate on the dispute because the matter had been addressed, and I did not want to upset the children again. Law school was rigorous, but studying for the bar exam was extremely difficult. Denise and her companions spent 4 months studying law and preparing for the 3-day test. I did my best to assist her by giving her foot massages and going on late-night ice cream runs. Denise excelled, scoring the highest on the bar exam. She got a high-paying job in Dallas, so we moved. I intend to start my MBA at SMU, but Denise advised us to prioritize saving money. While she worked her way up to partner at her firm, she pledged to help me get my MBA. When she became a partner, she persuaded me that having a 2-income family would allow us to invest for the future. So I found a job in Dallas and started working. I quickly learned that Denise believed what was hers and what was mine was up for debate. I was in charge of renting automobiles, managing the budget, handling student loans and other tasks. Denise looked after herself, and any attempt to trace her income resulted in a heated argument. We never found out where her earnings went. We lived in Dallas for 11 years until Denise's business sent her to Atlanta. I offered to Denise that we renovate my grandmother's house, which I inherited after she died. Denise declined, likening the dilapidated Victorian estate to the Addams family home. I promised her that we could restore it to her specifications within her budget. I suppose some of her reluctance stemmed from her being upset by my grandmother's proposal for a prenuptial agreement. Denise came across a pricey house with a tight homeowners association. I persuaded her to reconsider her decision, but she was adamantly opposed. I signed the papers to purchase a home and join a country club that we did not like. I moved positions at a brokerage firm and remained at the bottom. We struggled to make ends meet, and Denise chastised me in front of the kids, which strained our marriage. The third issue arose when the house began to degrade, and the homeowners association asked that I pay for expensive repairs I couldn't afford. I feared talking to Denise, but I had reached a breaking point. My most recent employment evaluation stated that I had surpassed my income limit, implying that I was locked in my current position with no prospects for advancement. I described our challenging predicament to Denise again, presenting her the work review. Even while it made me feel ashamed as usual, she sneered, claiming that her mother had always been correct about me, defeated. I sat at the table while she walked away. The next day she told me about her plans. Her organization required someone to temporarily handle their Chicago office. This opportunity may lead to becoming the next partner at the law firm. She and the children would stay with her mother while I stayed behind to correct the issue I had caused. Despite the difficulties, I refrained from showing my frustration. The kids didn't seem upset about being removed from me. Instead, they were thrilled with the prospect of moving to Chicago and spending time with their grandma. Seeing them off at the airport was heartbreaking, but they were excited to leave. Later, I went home and cried. The next day, I planned a meeting with the homeowners association board to offer my proposal for repairing the house according to their standards. They flatly rejected my concept and placed stringent requirements that I had to meet in order for things to function. I had to make sacrifices despite my family's departure. I was still struggling financially. I started with simple jobs and worked my way up to more complex ones. It seemed that with each completed project, 2 new ones appeared, and I began to despise the money pit I called home. I could only communicate with my family on rare occasions, and our conversations were brief. Before they cut off the phone, I began to drinking as a coping strategy at work. This behavior was frowned upon, but by that point, I didn't care. Time passed and the winter vacations neared. I called Denise and asked her to come home so I could be with my family. She explained that it was not possible owing to her work schedule. I recommended flying there instead. She responded that I should prioritize fixing the house above taking a trip. Denise indicated that her family will be away for Thanksgiving, so there was no reason for me to come. Susan then said that the family was gathering at her grandmother's house, and she was looking forward to seeing her cousins. Finally, Brian mentioned that his uncle would take him to the Bears game at Soldier Field on Thanksgiving. Something seemed odd, and I couldn't take it any longer. I chose to travel to Chicago. There, I found answers to questions I didn't know I had. One question concerned how soon I was replaced. The most hurtful response came when Susan turned 18. I anxiously tried to contact her and Brian following my trip to Chicago, leaving multiple phone messages pleading with them to call me back. Unfortunately, they never answered my calls. 2 weeks after Susan's birthday, I received a large manila envelope by mail. Inside, I discovered documentation indicating that Susan had applied in Cook County to change her name from Susan and Mallon to Susan in Starling. She claimed to desire the name of her biological father, Paul L. Starling. Susan Mallon and Paul Starling provided affidavits, saying that they began an intimate connection in college and continued it through law school, resulting in the birth of their daughter. DNA results from 3 renowned labs, notarized, corroborated this. A file-stamped copy of the judge's decision approving the name change was also provided. I anticipated that when Brian turned 18, I would probably get a similar surprise. Denise called and asked if I had received a package. I answered yes. It was intended for her mother, but a secretary's oversight resulted in it being forwarded to me. Denise stated that the secretary was dismissed. No, Denise, I am the one who has made mistakes. I've been making these for more than 20 years. I finished the call and shortly thereafter received the divorce papers. Denise earned more, but she argued I didn't deserve a fair share of the marital assets. It was hers. It was my. The house was the lone exception. She wanted half when it sold, despite the fact that she made no contributions to it. In other terms, I would lose $400,000. I was curious how she responded when she received the harsh property settlement agreement back signed by me without opposition. I took a moment to refocus on the flaws and realized I'd gone into autopilot. The faults had now been sanded and buffed, making them ready for staining and varnishing. I was proud of the progress I had achieved. The stain I chose would match the pastel colors in the various rooms. After I finished the stain process, I aimed to apply several coats of varnish to protect it. I uncapped the first bottle of the day and wandered around the rooms, noticing minor flaws that still needed to be addressed. However, all of the assignments were basic. I pondered taking on another large endeavor to occupy my time, but I didn't make any immediate decisions. I was on the master bedroom balcony admiring the expansive backyard. I considered having a large swimming pool with an associated hot tub as well as a pool house. I smiled at the thought of studying and applying for permits. I imagined other pool sizes and styles, estimating the prospective expenditures. Soon, I heard a strange vehicle and people shouting. However, they were not visible from the back. I went to a bedroom that faced the front street. I looked down and saw a large rental truck with a trailer attempting to pull into the driveway of the house next door. The driver fought to control the vehicle and accidentally jackknifed the trailer into the wet grass, causing the wheels to spin deeper into the lawn. I hurriedly stepped outside and tapped the driver's window. Startled her. She turned and looked at me, surprised, and despite her difficult condition and tears, she was unquestionably beautiful. She had to deal with 2 yelling young children in the passenger seat. I inquired if she needed assistance, and she graciously nodded, tears in her eyes. I handed her my umbrella, and she swiftly brought the youngsters from their chairs to the front porch for safety. I adjusted the wheels and changed into low gear, gently tapping the gas pedal to keep the rear wheels from spinning slowly. I moved the vehicle and trailer out of the rut, causing some damage to her front yard. We continued on our journey after becoming free. Most individuals have never driven a vehicle with a trailer attached in reverse. With a trailer you must turn in the other direction from usual. I carefully steered the trailer up the driveway, making sure both the trailer and the vehicle were in position for unloading. I raced from the rain into the porch after turning off the vehicle. The children applauded and the blonde woman smiled broadly. I concluded I liked her, grinning rather than crying. Here are the keys. I handed them to her and placed them in her small hands. Thank you very much for assisting us. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. She had the nicest southern accent. I am Mark Mallon. I'm happy to help a neighbor. I mentioned that I assumed you were the new neighbors. Jeannie Harris responded, I apologize. I'm Jeannie and these 2 are Kay and Billy. The youngsters rejected the description but hugged their mother. I smiled, knowing that the situation was ended. I hope you have help unloading the truck and trailer. I commented that Jeannie seemed sad. We had helped loading but there are just 3 of us unloading. I offered. Allow me to assist if it becomes too difficult. I can contact some folks to aid. I got another smile of gratitude as she thanked me warmly. I offered to do as much unpacking as I could by myself and then we'd work it out. The 3 retreated to their house. Cries of dismay rang through the house immediately. I entered the dimly lighted room where Jeannie was plainly agitated and explained that the electricity was meant to be turned on. I reassured her before heading outside to phone a friend who worked for the power company. I gave him the address and he noted that he had gotten that particular assignment for placing the meter. However, because no one was home, he was required by corporate rules to vacate the premises. He planned to return on Monday afternoon to try again. They're here now, she remarked, referring to the woman with 2 young children. You owe me some favors, so come over, set up the meter and get creative with the paperwork. He agreed, so I hung up. I approached Jeannie and informed her that the power will be turned on soon. She praised me and the children applauded. I unlocked the trailer and began carrying boxes into the dimly lighted front room, which was backlit by the rainy daylight. Jeannie assisted with the smaller, lighter boxes while the kids watched from the porch. They were adorable as they disputed who should sleep in their room first. Jeannie gave me a sardonic grin as she observed the children. I reminded her to let me handle the larger boxes as I took a large one from her and placed it in the increasing pile inside. Just as we were finishing unloading the trailer, my friend John arrived in his work vehicle. Soon, lights illuminated the house, thrilling the children as they raced from room to room investigating. John returned to his truck to fetch the paperwork for Jeannie to sign. So Mark, have you emptied everything? I replied. John, we're currently working on the trailer. and have yet to start on the vehicle. John approached the trailer and picked up a box, carrying it inside. This prompted me to make a few phone calls and inform Jeannie and John to take a break. We sat down to get to know each other better. Before I could ask if she could afford a house in the neighborhood, Jeannie mentioned that she was an elementary school teacher. Help has arrived. Friends and their families arrived with pizzas, drinks for adults, and sodas for the youngsters. Everyone pitched in to assist unload the truck. The women toured the house while the children played inside and decorated. Plans were addressed. Boxes were opened. Furniture was shifted to the right rooms and the living room were decorated. It was a simple afternoon spent enjoying time with friends. I was shocked at how fast Jeannie felt at ease hosting a group of individuals she had just met. Her pleasant attitude quickly won over friends. The women exchanged phone numbers and made plans for lunch. John leaned forward and tapped me with his soda bottle, whispering, "You know, the common factor among all these ladies is that you should prepare your ears to burn." I laughed and presented my pool concept, which prompted a conversation with the guys as we were brainstorming. Throughout the afternoon, the boys exchanged opinions. Jeannie and I would exchange quick glances and smiles. The party came to a close and everyone left. Let me help Jeannie bring the sleeping youngsters upstairs to their bedrooms, where she carefully nestled them in and whispered goodnight. We descended the stairs and went outside to sit on the front steps. I offered her a beer but she declined, so I drank from the chilly bottle. We proceeded to sit and relax. "Mark, you are fantastic. Thank you so much for all you have done for us." Jeannie expressed gratitude. "Jeannie, I was simply acting neighborly. There is no need to thank me," I responded modestly. "Rubbish," she countered. "Without you, I'd still be stuck in my front yard with two wailing children in a house without power. Mister, I owe you a great deal." I chuckled and replied, "Just wait until you get to know me." I took another sip from my drink. "By the way, what are your plans with the truck?" Jeannie's expression betrayed her aggravation as she described her difficult cross-country travel in the truck. She had encountered numerous angry cars who honked at her when she needed to stop for petrol, food, or a potty break. Her inexperience driving a truck has caused multiple traffic bottlenecks at petrol stations, fast food restaurants and motels. Jeannie had often been humiliated and insulted before she was able to overcome her problems. She lamented that she would now have to return the truck cross-country because the U-Haul business compelled her to do so. I placed my hand on her shoulder to console her. "Jeannie, I will handle returning the truck to them." She looked at me with disbelief. "Mark, I cannot let you do that." I comforted her. "Jeannie, you cannot put your children through another trip like that. I can take care of it. You know I will not steal the truck and you know where I live." After a few more hours of her wrangling, she eventually handed me the leasing papers. When I told her I'd leave around 9 a.m., she suggested we call it a night. As we stood up, she unexpectedly hugged me and kissed me on the cheek before going inside. I felt happy as I walked home. The next morning, I knocked on his door. She opened it and I was greeted by two excited children hugging my legs, calling me Mr. Mark. I laughed and picked them up, carrying them inside. Jeannie nervously handed me keys and an envelope full of $20 bills. She explained it was for gas money and a bus ticket to get back home. "Mark, please be careful," she said as I started the truck and backed the trailer down the drive. "When will you be back?" she asked. I smiled. "Sooner than you think. I drove toward the interstate but turned into the local U-Haul store before reaching the on-ramp. The store manager Perry greeted me. "Hi Mark, what up?" Mark handed him the paperwork and he examined it. "Perry, this states it's a round-trip rental and the truck and trailer should return there." "Well Perry, things have changed and this needs to be a one-way rental. I'll cover any additional costs for altering the terms." "All right, let me confirm this with the original store." While he waited, Perry noticed an escalating conversation with the other party. The phone, culminating in him yelling that he would accept delivery of the truck and trailer. He then slammed the phone down as he walked to Mark. He said, "Don't say a word, Mark." I smiled and handed him the keys as he inspected the truck. Then I gave him a credit card to cover the change from a round-trip rental to a one-way. He handed me a receipt and I thanked him. 30 minutes later, I found myself getting out of a taxi in front of my house. Kay and Billy were playing outside and as they saw me, they excitedly called out Mr. Mark. Jeannie, who was outside, came over with a surprised look on her face. "What happened? Please don't tell me you had an accident." I laughed and informed her that I had just returned from dropping off the truck and trailer at the local U-Haul store. She frowned. "But back home, they told me when I rented the truck, I had to contract it for a round trip. They weren't going to let me have it unless I returned it." "Jeannie, when I talked to the local U-Haul manager, he called them and explained the change in circumstances and got them to agree to allow him to accept the delivery of the truck." Okay, it was a lie. But it didn't hurt anyone except the jackasses that rented the truck and it solved a problem. At any rate, Jeannie smiled as I gave her the receipt, which signified the transaction was complete. "You seem to be having fun," she remarked, glancing at my dirty clothes. She explained that the house was more complicated than she initially thought. I offered to help her if things got too difficult and returned the envelope of money she had given me earlier. I went back to working on my house, applying the stain to the second floor and starting on the first floor. The task was therapeutic, but my thoughts kept drifting to the attractive blonde next door. I hadn't felt like coming in a long time, but there I was, humming away. Just as I was lost in my thoughts, there was a knock on my door. Anxious, Jeannie stood outside. "I have a plumbing emergency. There's water leaking under my toilet. Can you help me? Let me grab some tools and I'll be right over." "Jeannie," I quickly gathered up all the tools I suspected I would need and went next door. Kay and Billy were waiting for me at the door. I found Jeannie in the bathroom, wiping up water with a towel and hand-wringing it into the sink. I set my tools down and knelt to turn off the water at the valve. After flushing the commode, water leaked from the toilet. I assured Jeannie I could handle it, and she moved away attempting to discreetly remove her clothing from the shower rod. I didn't acknowledge her actions as she stood in the doorway. Quickly, I disconnected the tank from the water line and removed it from the bowl. The wax ring had failed, as I suspected. I cleared the old wax ring and replaced it with a spare for my own renovations. Throughout the process, I explained my actions to Jeannie. I applied caulk around the edge of the bowl and gently placed it on the flange. I instructed Jeannie to sit on the toilet lid and she giggled as she complied. Her weight would help ensure a proper seal. I tightened the bolts to the flange screws while working around her. Then a sudden impulse struck me. I considered opening her long, shapely legs and burying my face and her jeans-covered private area. However, I dismissed the thought and focused on the task at hand. After ensuring the wax ring was sealed, I kept Jeannie sitting for an extended period. Despite the challenging positions I had to assume. Eventually, I asked her to stand so I could reattach the tank. Once secure, I turned the water supply back on and conducted a test flush. The water flowed normally and Jeannie exclaimed in triumph. I finished with another bead of caulking around the bottom of the bowl. After that, it was just a matter of mopping and cleaning up. She moved to hug me but I indicated my wet clothes. Well, let me wash them, she cried. I reminded her that I would be running around without clothes and she blushed. She said she would like to treat me to a meal but without her car, she hadn't had a chance to shop for groceries. She and the kids would be surviving on delivery food. I told her if she liked, I would go home, change and take them out for dinner. She was worried that they were imposing on me too much. I told her not to think that way and I would be there at 6 p.m. to take them out for dinner at 6 p.m. I arrived at their garage and they greeted me. They were pleased to see I had bought booster seats for Kay and Billy. We put the kids in their seats and went to a family-friendly Italian restaurant. I got to know my new neighbors better as Kay and Billy shared stories. Jeannie smiled as her kids shared moments, occasionally redirecting the conversation when personal details emerged. After dinner, we visited an ice cream shop with a play area for kids. We observed the children playing with others in the park. Jeannie's expression, love for her kids, was something artists have tried to depict throughout history. She caught me staring at her and refocused on me. So you like me, Jeannie? Harris. I playfully teased her. She reddened. I felt the same way when Kay accidentally announced it. Our conversation then covered various subjects, including why Jeannie didn't have her car. She shared that her brother, an engineer, would be returning from overseas duty and driving her car to them. Until then, they would rent a car starting the following day. Nonsense. Just borrow mine. I said, I rarely drive it anyway since I'm usually in my truck. And again, we argued until I finally convinced her that by borrowing my car was the cheapest expedient solution to her problem. When we started home, the kids drifted to sleep almost immediately, worn out from their exertions. On the way, I pointed out the various controls and features of the car to Jeannie, who quietly ate all in. I parked in her drive and Jeannie went to tucking Kay in on the bed. I went to get Billy and Jeannie was there waiting as I put him to bed. She fussed over him and I realized I missed that part of family life. My sadness showed and Jeannie gave me a worried look. I tried to reassure her, but she knew better, handing her my car keys. She gently touched my cheek and gave me a soft, goodnight kiss. Back home, I think I levitated all the way there. On Monday, I returned to work but couldn't focus due to thoughts of Jeannie. I shut down my computer and did various tasks around the house, including finishing the staining of the first floor. It was a good day as the number of house projects decreased, although I couldn't see the end yet. Progress was being made before the knock on the door. I heard voices calling for Mr. Mark, smiling. I opened the door to see the two kids and Jeannie inviting me to join their first home-cooked meal. I asked for 15 minutes to take a quick shower and they agreed to wait. When I arrived, the dining room table was filled with a variety of dishes. Fried chicken, southern fried potatoes, biscuits, and gravy. Corn and black-eyed peas were served. A warm apple pie was also present. The kids argued over who would sit next to me to resolve the situation. Jeannie suggested I sit at the head of the table. The kids sat on either side of me and Jeannie sat across from me. After saying grace, we all enjoyed the meal, I filled up on the delicious food and groaned in pleasure. When a slice of apple pie, a la mode, was placed in front of me, I managed to eat every last bite. The rest of the evening was spent playing a number of children's games. 9 p.m. arrived and the kids headed to bed with Jeannie trailing behind part way up. She gestured for me to join her upstairs. I followed and we each read a bedtime story to our respective children as they dozed off. Jeannie and I tiptoed downstairs. She brewed some coffee and we worked together to tidy up from dinner. Jeannie filled a large ceramic mug for me and inquired about my preference. I mentioned I liked it black and she made her coffee with cream. We carried our mugs to the porch swing and enjoyed the pleasant November evening while sipping our coffee. Kay and Billy were the subjects of our conversation when I found myself discussing Susan and Brian with her as I opened up about the challenges my family and I faced. I poured my heart out. Jeannie listened attentively. Her eyes filled with sympathy. She offered comfort by resting her head on my chest. It was a relief to have someone who understood my struggles. Jeannie then shared her story in a gentle whisper. She had experienced a picture childhood, was crowned homecoming queen, and married her high school sweetheart. They pursued their college education and started a family together. Somewhere along the line the train derailed from its intended path. A couple started arguing about harmless teasing that had turned into more serious issues as the disagreements intensified. They sometimes became physical. Fortunately, their young children were oblivious to the escalating tension. The word divorce began to surface more frequently in their conversations. One night, a devastating phone call from the police rocked them to their core. A deadly car accident claimed the life of a young woman. Driver thrown from the wreckage was her deceased spouse. It appears they were involved in an intimate moment at the time of the tragedy. From that point, Jeannie faced a hard predicament. Her in-laws and the dead girl's relatives blamed her for the difficulties. As the estate moved through probate and issues arose, Jeannie blamed herself as well. After navigating the hurdles, she decided to start fresh and move to a new neighborhood where she could begin anew. She used all her money to buy the house. Now she had only a job offer in the school district and a faltering investment account. She would need to use the money to meet expenditures until she started job. Unexpected repairs added to her bills. Despite this, she had no regrets about moving. We sat in silence watching the swing sway. I indicated wanting to inspect her hedge fund account. I believed I could restore her stock holdings. She disappeared, returned with a file and requested me to check it. She'd review it later. We exchanged goodnight kisses as soon as I arrived home. I began analyzing Jeannie's hedge fund account and noticed various dubious acts. The manager used to enrich himself. Not only was he dishonest, but he was also incompetent, as proven by his terrible stock investment choices. I was convinced that I could enhance her account by 30% in the first year alone. I marked different things to discuss with Jeannie the following day and went to bed, still thinking about our earlier kiss during supper at Jeannie's. We enjoyed another excellent supper and played more children's games before bedtime. This time I read Kay to sleep, tucking her in and wishing her good night. The night was cool, making it less enticing to spend time outside. I needed the table to organize my work for Jeannie, which involved analyzing data, reviewing spreadsheets, and producing projections. As Jeannie returned downstairs and started another pot of coffee, she inquired about my discoveries. I advised her that she was being shortchanged and that I could help her when we got into the details. She moved toward the den. I asked her if everything was okay. She replied that there were no issues. She trusted me and saw no need for further explanation. Instead, she welcomed me to the den to unwind. We talked late into the night as the fire burned in the fireplace, gradually disappeared. In the brief time I knew Jeannie, I discovered that despite our age difference, I felt more at ease with her than with Denise. As we kissed goodnight, I received her signature, authorizing me to take over her stock account and a standing invitation to supper. As soon as I awoke, I concentrated on stabilizing Jeannie's financial status. I phoned her old broker to advise him that he was no longer in control of her account. He became recalcitrant until I mentioned involving the SEC. This sparked a change in his attitude, and he agreed to reimburse Jeannie for all of the expenses she had paid, totaling $5,000. Within minutes, I received an electronic confirmation of the account change. It was a significant feat in only 10 minutes. I began rearranging her investing portfolio, removing underperforming equities, and replacing them with more reliable ones. I have included several risky equities that could potentially generate bigger returns, but would require attentive monitoring. I chose not to charge a fee for managing her investments. After a profitable trading day, I felt proud of my efforts. That evening, I went to supper at a nearby restaurant satisfied. When I tried to discuss her portfolio with Jeannie, she informed me that she respected my judgments and did not require daily reports, with her belief in me. I continued to manage her assets and looked forward to our nightly sessions. Instead of concentrating on house improvements, Jeannie and the children spent their weekends visiting the city. While this was not totally factual, I was assisting Jeannie at her home. Her house, like mine in the past, needed some repairs. My skills came in handy as we addressed issues and proposed solutions. Jeannie made the final decision, but she also set the tempo of our relationship. Our goodnight kisses progressed into more intimate encounters. When the kids were asleep, Jeannie only let me get to second base since she felt uncomfortable doing more with the kids upstairs. Despite this, merely holding Jeannie's lovely body next to mine was enough for me, even if I did occasionally return home in discomfort. Then, Jeannie's brother Ray and his family arrived in her automobile. We grilled steaks as he and I became acquainted. I could tell Jeannie was going to ask him what he thought of me, and I wanted an honest opinion, so I didn't make any pretenses with him. Ray, I want you to know that I genuinely care for Jeannie. I hope we can all get along nicely. Please allow me some time to show you how much I care about her. Mark, I understand that you've always been there for Jeannie and the kids. She values your presence, and I believe the two of you would make an excellent couple. However, if you ever injure her in the way that terrible person did, you and I will have an unpleasant chat. We hoisted our beer bottles and carried the steaks inside. After supper, Billy and Kay brought their cousins upstairs, while Jeannie and I talked with Ray and his wife. Our chat finally shifted to hilarious childhood memories. Jeannie would laugh and playfully object as Ray continued to tell stories all night. Finally, Ray glanced at his wife and said, "Honey, let us put the kids to bed and then get some rest." With that, we all agreed. Our good nights are in the dim moonlight. I gradually undressed Jeannie, taking the time to kiss each exposed place as her top was removed. I noticed her well-shaped chest for the first time. Its prominent outlines highlighted the pale brown patches that framed her small, pea-sized teats. I gently grabbed her breasts, kissed and nibbled on her teats. Jeannie's fingertips massaged my hair and encouraged my contact. Although I wanted to cherish the occasion, I was eager to resume our personal relationship. I went southward, gently kissing her ribcage, abdomen, and navel. I slowly removed her panties, which dropped to her feet. As I knelt before her in amazement, her beautiful tawny hair shimmered with expectation. I moved to her ankles, licking and nibbling while my fingers traced her leg muscles. My tongue traced a lengthy path up to her knees as I kissed and nibbled behind them. Her entire body trembled in reaction. I found a sensitive place. I ascended to her firm thighs, kissing and biting her silky flesh. I approached to her crotch where the alluring perfume flooded my nostrils. I gently kissed around the area but never directly on her private region. A tender place emerged from within the folds of her inner thighs. Jeannie's anticipation intensified as she encouraged Mark to get closer. "Please, Mark," she pleaded, "no one has ever gone through this with me." Mark, ecstatic at the thought of being the first to explore her, maintained his methodical seduction. He lavished Jeannie with soft kisses, tenderly caressing her in response to her growing yearning. She begged me to stop, but I persisted, wanting to push her to the limit of pleasure. I moved in and lightly kissed her inner leg, making her tremble unexpectedly. I placed my lips against her delicate skin, tracing my tongue through her warm velvety folds. My tongue danced and explored, evoking a scream of delight as her body trembled from pleasure. Her hands held my hair, forcing me to go further, and I followed suit, my tongue burrowing into her depths. I could feel her heartbeat and the throbbing of her love button. So I focused on it, flicking my tongue against the tip. Her sobs of pleasure became more frantic. And I knew she was nearing the height of her ecstasy. Jeannie laughed loudly as they played a game together. Her muscular legs tickled him gently, forcing him to laugh as well. They continued to enjoy each other's company, exchanging many grins and laughs. After a fun-filled day, they retreated to their bedroom to embrace and exchange warm heartfelt kisses. As I stripped, I noticed her eyes appreciating my body, and her jaw fell in surprise. When I took my shorts off, Jeannie knew I was well endowed from our makeout sessions, but this was the first time she had ever seen my chest. My broad-shouldered, well-built figure swung as I got into bed, and Jeannie gripped and squeezed my chest. "My God, you're far more muscular than Richard," she marveled. "I'm not sure I can handle that in my frail, small arms." She knelt over to begin stroking her newly discovered source of strength. She managed to squeeze in about 4 inches before having to stop. She told me I could easily lift Richard now. "I'm scared that I won't be able to help you." He instantly began kissing her, telling her that simply loving him was enough to satisfy him. She redoubled her efforts, and though she couldn't take him lengthwise, she wowed him with her harp skills. He groaned as he approached a climax. She redoubled her efforts, stroking his hard pull with her palm and kissing the tip of his mouth. He warned her that he was going near, and she proceeded, claiming she desired his climax and began to fondle his private area. Then he exploded inside her mouth. First, a thick, forceful stream of energy entered her mouth, which she greedily consumed. Then, a second, and a third, then followed the fourth and fifth. She stepped next to me and we resumed kissing. Within minutes, it was clear that I was ready to go again. Jeannie couldn't believe it, claiming Richard was only available once per night, even on their honeymoon. I rolled on top of her, reminding her of all the ways I was different from Richard. I slowly eased my body inside hers, letting her adjust to my size. Each indication of difficulty would be replaced by a look of pleasure, and she would encourage me to continue. The close, warm sensation of our bodies coming together was thrilling. As I got further, Jeannie replied with oohs and ahs, moving her body against mine. Finally, I was completely attached to her, tying her to the bed as she gazed up at me in astonishment, passion wriggling against me. I slowly and cautiously moved closer to Jeannie, causing friction between our bodies. Jeannie sighed and I felt her muscles tense and uncomfortable. Every time my body moved away from hers and relaxed in expectation of each delightful advance. Her legs embraced me. Then she closed them around me as I proceeded in my attempts. We continued to kiss while we engaged in the action, oblivious to the passage of time. Our bodies glistened with sweat as we worked to fulfill one another. Our movements coordinated as we worked toward a same goal. Jeannie's rushed moans became increasingly urgent. She begged Mark to meet her wants, and their tempo quickened as Mark continued to fulfill her wishes. Jeannie's eager expression intensified, the tension rose. And Mark could feel his own climax approaching. "Wow, Mark!" Jeannie yelled out as she approached her. Climax. Mark continued to push himself. Power drove their bodies together with unwavering force. Jeannie's legs kicked furiously in the air, and her claws sank into Mark's back. Finally, she had her moment of ecstasy, thrusting against him as they hit their climax together. In reaction, I went closer to her, and our bodies became entwined. As the time came to a close, I heard her express her thanks with silent cries. We had a lovely moment when she sat on my lap to prevent discomfort. Our mingled bodily fluids cooled against us, signaling the conclusion of our intimate contact. I softly stroked her as I returned. We exchanged kisses as we recovered. We continued to quietly explore one another as the night progressed. I can only describe how captivated I was by her beauty to justify my next move. This time, I had Jeannie sit on my lap, cowboy style, and she established her own tempo while grinding against me. My hands extended out and gripped her in appreciation, her curves undulating with motion. She groaned at first when I softly caressed the sensitive parts, but then she moved forward and offered her body to my mouth. I passionately kissed and caressed both of them as we drove each other to our next climax. This time, it came softly and gently as I focused my attention on Jeannie. We lost count of time as we gently stroked each other in the afterglow. Eventually, we realized we were both hungry. We smiled and rose from the bed. I slipped on my shorts and reached for a t-shirt, but Jeannie stated she was wearing one and was overjoyed to see her. I was expecting more, but she wore her new gown playfully as we went downstairs to the kitchen. We chatted lightly and comfortably while retrieving food from the refrigerator. Our relationship became stronger, evolving from neighbors to friends to lovers. As I put the plates away in the kitchen, seeing Jeannie at the table, barefoot and wearing my t-shirt, fueled my desire for her. I told her that I was still hungry. She appeared perplexed until I knelt in front of her and smiled broadly. She extended her legs, beckoning in. I concentrated on my duty, gently wiping the sink and storing the dishes. She repaid me with tender kisses and a bright smile. I gently carried her upstairs and put her on the bed, admiring her. At that time, I felt a strong sense of love and dedication. I promised to always defend and cherish her no matter what. It was an accidental moment that let me distinguish between Denise and Jean. My days of brooding on the past and working non-stop were behind me. It was time to embrace life once more. Jeannie and I hugged, and she wrapped my arm around her to keep her safe from the night. The warmth of her body eased my semi-erect state, and we both knew we'd wake up to a pleasant surprise in the morning. I whispered goodnight to her and we quickly fell asleep. Months passed until one afternoon, the front doorbell rang. To my amazement, Denise, Paul, Starling, Susan, and Brian were standing at the door. I knew they were back in town, so I didn't let them in and instead slammed the door behind me. We waited in silence until Denise spoke. She apologized that she had bungled our entire issue and wished to make things right. It turned out that Paul, the fraternity lad, was the person her sorority had matched her up with years prior. We were rivals despite having never met. Denise continued to see him, and it was 50-50 that any of us had impregnated her. Denise chose me and planned to spend her life with me later in law school. Paul was one of her classmates. He sought her, but she resisted for a while. But she soon fell for his charm again, rekindling their relationship. When Denise graduated, we moved to Dallas. She thought that would be the end of it. After going to Atlanta and later to Chicago, she discovered Paul working for a different company. They eventually reconciled and she realized that her children were his biological progeny. Despite this, she was patient and controlled her emotions. Denise prioritized the family's best interests, which included separating her husband and ensuring the best possible outcome for her children, including claiming half of the marital estate's proceeds. The family was moving to Atlanta because of a promotion. They learned about the renovation of the user's grandmother's former neighborhood in Chicago. Everyone wanted to purchase and renovate the historic mansions. The user was unemployed following a divorce and unable to maintain the grandmother's home. Denise offered to pay off the mortgage and provide $100,000 to level things out. The user had to transfer ownership of the grandmother's house to Denise. I stared at her while she held up the check. She slowly lowered her arm and I remained mute. I gently invited them inside and I thought I detected hints of victory in their smiles as they walked in. I could hear their shocked gasps as they glanced at the lobby, which was illuminated by the big chandelier. I explained my attempts to restore the entranceway. We entered the drawing room where the excellent workmanship and tasteful furniture wowed them. I talked about my efforts in each area while they marveled at the beautiful transformation in the house. Susan gasped when she saw the Steinway grand piano in the conservatory. Her passion for music was well known, and as a child, all she had was an electric keyboard. She softly stroked it as we proceeded to the next room. Then we moved upstairs to the vast, warm bedrooms, eventually ending up in the master bedroom, which was filled with sunlight. The master bathroom included a walk-in shower with multiple shower heads and a big enameled clawfoot tub. I brought them out to the balcony, which overlooked the Olympic-sized pool house, and hot tub on the patio deck. We continued exploring each area until we arrived at my study. I talked about the mahogany paneling and my search for furnishings that would match the theme. Several first-edition volumes lined the built-in bookcases. Butters, my pet golden retriever, approached and sat with me on the sofa. Denise scowled, displeased by the number of dogs around. She was no longer important to him. After visiting that location, would you ever consider returning to the root of your suffering? Before anyone could react, children poured in, joyfully sharing their day. We went to the aquarium, Billy shouted. That is an aquarium. Kay made a correction. Billy, but our aquarium at home is superior, Kay agreed. Their enthusiasm for the basement while the aquarium is obvious. Denise was taken off guard by the interruption. I didn't disclose any information because Jeannie was 7 months pregnant. Honey, I didn't realize you had visitors. I assisted Jeannie into a chair and inquired about her well-being. She replied with a loving smile and a kiss. I informed them that they were not visitors and that they were leaving now. I accompanied them outside and instructed them to keep their distance as they drove away. I knew they had many questions, but they'd never find the answer. I promptly walked out of the house and returned to my grandmother's house. After returning from Chicago, the house was still in decent condition, and I thought I could mostly restore it on my own. This became part of my work-based therapy. I used my years of expertise at brokerage firms to learn how to avoid dangers in trading. Despite having some independence in my work after returning from a trip, I opened a fictitious business account and used the organization's resources to participate in multiple transactions. By the end of the day, I had made a large amount of money and returned it all to the company. I removed the transaction records from the company's computers, leaving no evidence. Although I knew my activities were illegal, I justified them by thinking about the money I had helped my coworkers earn over time. I was satisfied with my one-day contribution. The next day, I increased my trading intensity and earned $10,000 before the end of the session. This pattern continued throughout the week, with my earnings doubling or tripling, until they hit $200,000. I decided to take a short position in certain expensive technology equities. I timed this trade correctly, resulting in 600% returns on each stock while avoiding a margin call. My wealth had crossed $1 million. However, my superiors began to inquire about the account. The same gentleman who had previously given me a terrible rating now asked that I turn up the account to him. In response, I promptly transferred the monies to an offshore account, turned to him, and ordered him to take a trip before quitting my job right away. Since then, I've continued to run until I was fairly successful. That is why I had no objections to signing Denise's property settlement agreement. In her rush to safeguard her valuables, she hadn't checked to see if I had any, and they kept growing gradually until I met Jeannie and realized I had an opportunity to start anew. When I married Jeannie, I finally divulged the amount in her account. She was taken aback when she heard the figure $2 million. Actually, she was startled when I informed her I was worth little more than $1,400 million. Then I informed her that I owned every house in the block radius surrounding ours. Her house was the only one I had been unable to acquire, and it turned out to be the best investment I never made. Denise would never comprehend the connection between wealth and authority. Overseeing such riches necessitated extensive legal counsel, which I contracted with Denise's firm to do. Even though she was unaware of it, I made it clear to several senior partners that I would be upset if Denise became a partner. That is, assuming she still had her law license. Denise and Paul went to the financial institution that owned the loan on our shared house and forged my signature on the paperwork for a supplementary mortgage. They did this to get a cashier's check and encumber me with the supplemental mortgage. Too bad they didn't realize I also owned the bank and had been notified of any questionable behavior on that account. Now, my good friend, the district attorney whom I backed in the previous election, would take legal action against Denise and Paul. He pledged to make sure they suffered harsh consequences for their behavior. I wondered as I hung up the phone with him whether Denise would represent herself or hire a public defender for her trial. With the introduction of the low-income housing project near my pals in the Homeowners Association Ocean, she wouldn't have much. My own contracting firm would construct the project, which would have a detrimental impact on the homeowners' property values. Everything was connected since I purchased the land to contribute for tax purposes. As I sat beside my wife, I placed her feet in my lap and softly massaged them. Our adopted children watched television with their cousins who are visiting from their new home. My wife's delighted sighs filled me with excitement as she smiled at me. Every night spent with her was a wonderful occasion. Thank you for spending the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this essay, please like it and subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you have a tale to tell about your or another person's predicament, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.